Welcome to an IELTS lesson, this time on grammatical range and accuracy. Here we'll be looking at a very complex grammar structure and apply it to different IELTS topics. Alright, if you want to get a high score on IELTS, you should also focus on how important grammar is, because grammar is 25% of your IELTS speaking score and also for your writing score. So in order to get band 7, 8, or 9, you need to use many different complex structures, not just the same ones all the time, but have a range of them. So here we'll notice how some simple sentences were changed to become more and more complex. I like muffins, they are delicious. Very simple. Make it more complex with the word because. I like muffins because they are delicious. Even more complex by adding the word partly. I like muffins partly because they are delicious. Even more complex now because of how. I like muffins partly because of how they are delicious. I don't eat them every day. And now finally the most complex part here. I like muffins somewhat because of how they are delicious, and yet I don't eat them every day. Another way of saying and yet is but. You can also vary things. Instead of saying partly, you can say somewhat, which has similar meaning. Or you can say mostly, which is a bigger reason for. Largely is similar to mostly. Kind of means sort of or partly. And instead of saying because all the time, you can use other words like due to, thanks to, by reason of. So those are just some different varieties of expressing this complex structure. Now let's focus on different topics. First we'll look at people, how we can use it for people. So here's some simple ways for doing it. And now we get more advanced. My father is successful partly because of how hard he works. My father is successful partly because of how hard he works, and yet he watches TV every evening. Same with sister, more complex. This time we use mostly thanks to, mainly by the reason of. My sister cooks poorly, mainly by the reason of how inexperienced she is, and yet my dad still eats her food. So here is the complex structure that you can use. This is just one structure. I suggest you learn many, but I want to give you lots of examples so you practice and consolidate the learning for this. So here are some of the adverbs you can use. These are very effective adverbs. This is different ways you can express because. And here we have the subject and the object. And you can even expand it by adding and yet. So my cat is nice largely because of how friendly it is, and yet she bites. All right, now let's look at applying the structure to the topic of people more. My mother is caring partly because of how nice she is, and yet she's lived a difficult life. My friend is helpful somewhat thanks to how kind she is. My teacher is smart, largely owing to how educated he is. My grandma is hard working, mainly because of how energetic she is, and yet she's over 70. Elon Musk is successful partly by reason of how innovative he is. LeBron James wins more primarily thanks to how hard he practices. So I suggest you go along and repeat with me to help improve your pronunciation, and also you'll consolidate your learning by looking at more and more structures this way. All right, now, can you think of some suitable ways to fill in the gaps here based on the beginning and ending parts here? I'll give you a minute to think, and in a second I will show you the answers. So press pause if you want to spend more time on it. Okay, here are the answers for it. My aunt paints well, partly because of how creative she is, and yet no one buys her art. My neighbor is not happy. My neighbor is not happy, mostly due to how stressed he is. And yet, He is dreaming of a better tomorrow. My friend is well liked, mainly owing to how sociable she is. Their classmates are annoying, somewhat thanks to how loud they are, and yet some people still like them. All right, let's focus on a different topic, places this time. So you can apply the structure to all of the IELTS topics basically. The cafe looks beautiful, especially by the reason of how well it is designed. The school was great, somewhat because of how good their teachers were. The building is well designed, partly due to how useful it is, and yet people didn't like it. The apartment is nice, especially thanks to how comfortable it is. The museum is interesting, primarily because of how entertaining it is. The park is so busy, somewhat owing to how great it was designed, and yet it has no flowers. The shop is so popular, partly by reason of how good the service is. The company is so productive, somewhat due to how well it is managed. Great. Now, can you apply your learning to complete the gaps here? In a few seconds, I'll show you the answer, so press pause if you want to think about it more. Okay, here are the answers. The kitchen looks nice, partly owing to how organized it is. The city is so polluted, somewhat thanks to how many cars there are, and yet more and more people are moving there. The restaurant is so popular primarily by reason of how great the cooks are. The garden is beautiful, especially due to how colorful the flowers are. All right. Another way of using the structure is to use gerunds. That means words, sentences starting with the verb plus ing. So playing is awesome, mostly due to how fun it is. So here we're starting with the verb in ing form, which is a little bit different, and it shows more range of how you can control and display your grammar so the examiners will be impressed. All right, so now we'll move on to a different part topic based on activities. Again, please say along to help improve your pronunciation. Playing computer games is fun, partly because of how exciting it is. Exercise is relaxing somewhat due to how healthy it is, and yet people have no time for it. Eating out is fun, mainly owing to how delicious the food is. Swimming is great, especially thanks to how beneficial it is. Walking is necessary. I think there's a mistake here. Oh no, it's okay. Walking is necessary kind of because of how relaxing it is, and yet most people will drive to work instead. Drawing is peaceful primarily due to how stress relieving it is. Drinking coffee is necessary for me mainly by reason of how poorly I sleep. Okay, and now another kind of quiz here. I'll show you the answers in a few seconds, so pause it if you want to focus on it more. Here are the answers. Reading books is important, somewhat because of how educational it is. And yet, most people prefer watching videos. Taking photos is nice, partly owing to how special it is. Playing card games is exciting, somewhat because of how entertaining it is. Watching Netflix is good, primarily due to how unproductive it is, and yet, so many people watch it. All right, you can do this for technology too. Like artificial intelligence is scary, especially due to how dangerous it can be, and yet very few people seem concerned about it. Very advanced structure with good vocabulary. Say sentences like this a lot and you'll get bands 7, 8, 9. All right, now I want you to make a full sentence without any beginning or ending here. And also do one and add and yet to it. In a few seconds I'll show you the answer, so pause if you like. Okay, here's some example answers. Mobile phones are so popular mainly because of how addictive they are. Buying computers is expensive largely by reason of how complicated they are, and yet people are buying them like crazy. Like crazy means a lot, like it's in fashion. Okay. All right, here we will move on to the topic of countries, and which is another common IELTS theme. An example here, Thailand is amazing, partly owing to how friendly the people are. And yet it has problems, like most countries have their own problems, right? Okay, and again, this time, try to make complete sentences. So you have your own freedom about any country or region. And try to make one with using and yet, and one starting with a verb plus ing, again. In a few seconds, I'll show you the answers right now. So for example, India is very stunning, partly thanks to how traditional and colorful it is. And yet, some people don't appreciate it. Stunning means very beautiful. They have nice, beautiful traditional clothes. Lots of different colors. Okay, Vietnam is fascinating, especially due to how beautiful the landscapes are. And yet, some tourists only visit the cities. Yeah, the landscapes, nice hills, mountains, bays. Traveling in China is hectic, mainly because of how crowded it is, and yet millions of sightseers do it every year. Hectic means crazy. Did you notice also here, instead of using the word people all the time, I changed tourists and sightseers. Sightseers and tourists mean the same thing. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.